to the White House after reports surface that the administration may now go to the United Nations to approve a possible nuke deal with Iran, bypassing the U.S. Senate altogether and denying a say to the American people. Senator Bob Corker, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee today, wrote to the president saying, quote, enabling the United Nations to consider an agreement while simultaneously threatening to veto legislation that would enable Congress to do the same is a direct affront to the American people and seeks to undermine Congress's appropriate role. Mark Thiessen is an American Enterprise Institute fellow and a Fox News contributor. He joins me now. Mark, so basically we learned this week that the White House has found a way to completely exclude the U.S. Senate from having any say on this deal. And he basically said, it's not a treaty, and you only get to approve it if it's a treaty, so it's not a treaty. Take that. And now he said, oh, but you, UN, I love your approval. Why? Why is he doing that?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's an outrage that he would do this. What the president is basically saying is that I care more about the approval of the United Nations than I care about the approval of the elected representatives of the American people. He's not simply not going to Congress. He's going to the United Nations and seeking the approval of dictatorships like Russia and China while threatening to veto legislation that would give Congress an up or down vote on this deal. So this is what he's trying to do. It's an outrage, and Congress is right to be angry.
He really doesn't want the United States Senate to weigh in on this. I mean, at all. I mean, he's making that very clear. And Kerry came out this week and said, you know, because if it was a treaty, the U.S. Senate would have to weigh in. And said, it's not a treaty. So there. But now, okay, so fine. So then these Republicans say, fine, if it's not a treaty, then it's not binding. So once President Obama's out of office, there'll be another president, and we can persuade that president to revoke all this. And then today we get news, maybe not, because the United Nations may have something else in store. How so?
So what he's trying to do is he's got this non-binding agreement with Iran, and he's going to take it to the UN Security Council, and the UN Security Council will give its blessing to this deal and give it the force of international law, which means that under international law, no country can impose sanctions on Iran unless they're violating the deal. That's what he thinks he's doing. The problem with that is that under U.S. law, the U.S. Constitution trumps international law. The U.S. Constitution trumps the UN Charter.
So the next president could come in and impose sanctions, notwithstanding what the UN may or may not be about to do.
Actually, the Supreme Court has actually ruled on this. The Supreme Court has actually ruled that domestic international law trumps a ratified treaty. So even if this was a ratified treaty, if Congress doesn't pass implementing legislation to put this into effect, it doesn't have any force of law over U.S. domestic law.
So why go to the effort? I mean, once basically the UN is going to do what it's going to do, why bother doing that if it can all be revoked by the next president?
Because he's trying to make it really hard for the next president to revoke it. Because the UN Security Council, while it doesn't have legal authority to bind the United States Congress, there's an international consensus. Everybody's behind this. And so what happens is the next president comes in and they say, look, Iran's complying with the deal, and why would you revoke that and impose sanctions against China, against Russia, against Britain, against France, and all these countries? It makes it very hard for the next president. But as Bibi Netanyahu pointed out in Congress, that Iran doesn't have to break out of the deal in order to get a nuclear weapon. The deal itself is a path to a nuclear weapon. So Iran's going to comply with the deal because it's a good deal for them. They don't need to break out of it. So it's going to make the next president's job very hard.
And if the next president goes to the United Nations and says, and they say, hey, we signed this deal and you need to go along in the United States, the president will say, well, you're not the boss of us. I got to go.
It's true.
Everything can be short formed by like if you are the parent of toddlers, you can all be short formed into like every message you give to your kids. Mark, good to see you.